Good morning. I'm Dottie Gallagher, President and CEO of the Buffalo Niagara Partnership. Welcome to the 5th annual D&I Symposium we call DEI at Work. We appreciate you spending time with us today as we all continue on our D&I journey. We start today's symposium 1 month after the terrible massacre on Jefferson Avenue. Although today's program was fully developed more than a month ago, our team felt it important to start today off hearing from Black community leaders as to what we as employers should be thinking about and doing to help heal East Buffalo. So we've extended our day. Following the panel and before we take our break, I'll do some housekeeping for our traditional symposium, but we want to get started right away. We're going to talk about what's next. And this session will be moderated by one of the most respected journalists in our region, Claudine Ewing from WGRZ. And I'm thrilled that she's here. And we're not going to read any bios, but all of the speaker bios are on the website. And I really hope you take the chance to read them because they're really impressive. Please welcome Claudine Ewing, who's joining us actually on her day off to moderate this panel. Thank you, Claudine, for being with us today.
Dottie, thank you for having me. And yes, it's my day off, but this is important. And so I'm glad to be here this morning. So hopefully for the next 55 minutes or so, everyone, you will get a better understanding of what is needed for a community that some would say is in crisis, but a community that is grieving and is in need of help from the private sector. So let me let you know who is on our panel for today. We have the Deputy Mayor of the City of Buffalo, Crystal Rodriguez-Dabney. Thomas Beauford is here. Thomas Beauford Jr., who is President and CEO of the Buffalo Urban League. Reverend Mark Blue, President of the Buffalo chapter of the NAACP. Pastor Kaiser Pointer is hopefully going to be here with us as well from Liberty Missionary Baptist Church. And Stephen Tucker, President and CEO of the Northland Workforce Training Center, which is doing some absolutely great work in our community and helping the next generation move forward. So we're going to get this discussion started. You won't hear a lot from me, but hopefully I can help facilitate this conversation so that you can get the best out of it. For everyone on the panel, and we can start off with you, Crystal. We know that this is a community that is in need in wake of what happened in May at Tops on Jefferson Avenue. What are you hearing from the people, and what do you believe is needed to help this community move forward? What can the private sector actually do?
Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me, Dottie. Claudine, thank you for hosting this. We're hearing voices that are just the same voices that we have been hearing. We want in our community, more investment. We want more participation. I think it's important that people understand in East Buffalo, there are a lot of people having conversations about what's going on East Buffalo. It's important to have people from East Buffalo involved in those conversations. You really can't, and the intentions are great, right? But you really can't have a conversation about creating plans. You can't have a conversation about investment. You can't have a conversation about improvement and development unless you include the people involved. So, everyone on this panel has been a part of these conversations. We know that there have been investments and improvements, and we know that, that there's going to be long-lasting work. It just can't be this related to 514. We have to make efforts to be committed to the investment, but more importantly, listening to people from the community. And everybody on this panel, I know personally who are from the community, and that's a start, but we want to get back into the community to hear what it is they need and connect them to the private corporations and the private sector that want to help.
Thomas, if you can weigh in on what the Urban League can try and do. I know it wasn't too long ago when we saw the national president of the Urban League come to town. I'm assuming that probably gave you more insight on what the Urban League can actually do. You have a presence in this community, but what can you all do, and what do you need from the private sector?
So yes, thank you, and good morning to everyone. From the Urban League perspective, and you mentioned having had some tenure in the community. We've been here. Buffalo Urban League has been here since 1927, and we consider ourselves not just an organization but a movement. And as a leader of this organization, I view my role as not only an administrator but an advocator and where required, an agitator as well. So what the Urban League is looking to do is to really address some of the issues that existed long before and conditions that existed long before uh, May 14th. Um, and we're looking to create systems and change that will not allow some of those conditions that um, kind of fueled or made that particular place a target, a rich target for the violence and the hatred that happened. So we're addressing all the socioeconomic issues, all the determinants that got there, and through our programs and advocacy.
Thank you for that. Mr. Tucker, Stephen Tucker from the Northland Training Workforce, you are seeing firsthand students who are coming to Northland because they want to do better. Some of them are saying, you know what, college is not for me. I want to go into this vocational trade. So they're doing it, but are they getting those jobs so that they can be productive in the Western New York community? We want them to stay here, not get that training and then go somewhere else. So, is the private sector doing enough to make sure that they are uh, having jobs and attracting these young people? And many of them are from the east part of Buffalo, and we'll talk about that, East Side versus East Buffalo. Are they doing enough to attract those individuals and keeping them and making them feel wanted and comfortable in these positions? Because to have a job and to feel not wanted can be a distraction.
Yes, and that is a great question. And since we've opened in 2018, we've enrolled more than 700 students, and we have a 65% program completion rate and an 88% job placement rate. So we have been very successful at placing graduates into employment opportunities with the private sector. However, I think moving forward, we really need to start to have those courageous conversations, because it's one thing to attract a diverse candidate. It's another thing for that diverse candidate to feel welcome and to advance in their careers with those companies. And Northern Workforce Training Center, after reflecting on our enrollment over the past couple of years, is almost like a microcosm of Western New York. 58% of our students are people of color, 42% are white, 58% of the students come from the city of Buffalo, with 40% coming from zip codes contiguous to 14211, which is actually East Buffalo. And since we've opened, we've had several challenges that's pretty much reflective in the community. Buffalo is one of the sixth highest segregated cities. And the reason why I bring that up is because we also have an isolation index in Western New York of 88 to 90%, meaning that there's a high probability that someone from one community won't interact with someone from another. And when you have the Northern Workforce Training Center with the diversity that we have, we've had some challenges. We've had grievances filed against some of the faculty for racial discrimination, sexual discrimination. We had a racial slur written in one of our labs before. We've also had minorities and people of color act out towards people from the suburbs. So we have to address those problems. And the only way we can is if we start to have those courageous conversations and create an atmosphere where everyone feels included and everyone has access to opportunity with the opportunity to advance in their careers.
Let me just follow up on that. That's interesting that you said some of those things happen. With that happening, is there something that the business community and the private sector can do? Do you bring them in to educate them as well, or to help them to help the students, and also for the companies to learn as well?
We do. We actually work with the companies to set up organizational cultures where people feel included and valued. And just let me give you an example of an actual story. I've had several human resource representatives from several companies say things like, we're not sure if Northland students can be successful within our companies. And when I peel back the onion, I say, well, where are you currently hiring your people from? They were just getting them off the street. And what's the turnover rate with that strategy? It's a very high turnover rate. And it made me wonder, you believe that human resource rep, you'll have more success hiring people off the street than you would hiring people from Northern Workforce Training Center. And when you really get down to it, it was some of the stereotypes and the implicit biases that some of the workers in those companies had towards hiring people of color or inner city residents. So until we start to have those courageous conversations and address those issues, we're going to continue to have problems. And just imagine if you are a person of color, a young person going to work out in the private sector where the majority of the people do not look like you, and that's the attitude that you're coming in with and you have to face, it's not going to make you feel very comfortable, and more than likely you're not going to stay.
Right. Advancement cannot happen if that continues. So it's good that you're bringing it out. And that's why this forum is here, to put these issues on the table and have this open conversation so that those who are in the business community, the private sector, can hear it. And nobody can say they don't know, because it's being discussed now. We do want to let everybody know that Reverend Pointer was having some technical issues, so he likely will not be able to join us this afternoon or this morning. He was here, but technical issues happen. Let's move on now to Reverend Mark Blue from the NAACP. You have seen it all. You've been fighting it all. What do you see that the private sector in Western New York can do to help? And
one of the things that need to happen is that businesses need to be more in the city as well. They moved out to the outlying areas, to the suburbs, which is also segregating the workforce culture. And if they were to be more in the city, they will help develop their culture. And as Mr. Tucker was saying, some of those implicit biases will be few and far in between because of that. So we need to continue to build a diverse workforce, but the employers need to be a part of the process. They've outlined themselves in some of the, again, suburban areas where they need to be more in the city, to be more the part of the process. Also, in the incidents that we just happened in May, some of the employers only visited that site because of what happened, and hearts have been broken for the tragedy that has happened in our community. So some of it because of they feel hurt and understanding. That was a big shock to everyone's system. No one would have ever thought that would have happened in our area. So you have a lot of open hearts right now. You have a lot of people saying, what can I do to help the process become better? And what we can do is let's build on East Buffalo instead of out in the suburban areas. Let's have more interaction to make sure that the culture can be more diverse. I've seen a whole lot of things. And one of the things that NAACP is doing is dealing with a lot of the laws that are out there. A lot of people feel that their vote doesn't count. And that's one of the biggest things that we have to make sure that people get out and vote, and that they're educated on the process of voting, because that's the only tool we have. That's the only way we can fight for equality. And that's the only way our voices can be heard. And we know that all politics are local. So any and all of our local representatives, we need to make sure that they are not just saying the right things, but they're doing the right things for the people they represent. So companies need to come back to the city of Buffalo. Buffalo was a booming, industrious town. Bethlehem still left, Republicans still left, a lot of those companies left, but still on the east, in East Buffalo, there's room for employment opportunities. There's room for companies to come and flourish in the East Buffalo. So it's important that we all become a part of the process and not a part of the problem.
let's talk about this East Side versus East Buffalo. We're noticing a change in what we're saying, and especially now in wake of what happened on May 14th at Tops. Why that change now from East Side to, let's refer to that area of the city as East Buffalo? Crystal, do you want to weigh in on that?
Sure. Simply put, and I do it myself, having grown up, I have said, even as recent as an interview with you, I grew up on the East Side because that's what we've always called it. But looking back, we don't call North Buffalo North Side. We don't call South Buffalo South Side. So there's a sort of negative connotation that goes with East and West Side versus North and South Buffalo. And we'd like, from our perspective, everyone to think of our communities as all of Buffalo. And when you say East Side, West Side, as opposed to North Buffalo, South Buffalo, it's exclusionary. So we're different somehow in East Buffalo or West Buffalo. We're not maybe as good as North Buffalo or South Buffalo, and we know that that's not true. And we're all a part of one city, and we want to not only change outside perspectives. I think that it's important that we change our own perspective. We are East Buffalo, and it's a part of our city, and we are no different than anybody else, no less than anybody else. And we want to think of ourselves that way, but we want everyone else to think of us that way too.
And Thomas, do you think this is something, I know you deal with a lot of members of the private sector and dealing with them. How do you get that message across to them so that, it's also a respect thing? Because if you're going to, now everybody's East Buffalo, South Buffalo, North Buffalo, West Buffalo, it's respect, and it changes how people start to think. How will you deal with companies, and how do you help them to understand the difference?
Right. So, Claudine, as a journalist, you know that there's power in words, right? And there's power in a name. So we want to get beyond that, and the stigma that underlines that. The other thing is with regard to, Mr. Tucker Stevens spoke about courageous conversations, and hopefully those courageous conversations lead to courageous actions. Reverend Blue spoke about equality, but equality almost assumes that all other things being equal today, that everyone will have an equal opportunity. And what we need is beyond, this discussion is not about equality, but more about equity. And equity takes deliberate action. Equity has to consider the existing conditions and all the causation that got it there, and starts to deal with those things, right? Equality is being able to ride on the front of the bus or anywhere you want to ride on the bus. Equity is having a bus line that comes through your neighborhood at a time that gets you to a job that's well paying when you need it to get your children to school. So that's a little different, right? And that takes deliberate action. And sometimes that takes looking at priorities while whatever the resources that exist, that takes reprioritizing those resources or reappropriating those resources, right? Putting this first, that's deliberate action. That's not comfortable for everyone. That's a systemic change. And that's where we need to get to deal with some of these issues when we talk about, East side versus North side. We have to look at some of those systemic things and really be deliberate to get transformational change.
And when we talk about having talk and then there's action, the Buffalo Niagara Partnership is already doing that on their website. They have already changed their references from East Side to East Buffalo, and that is a result of conversations that they had. And I know when I spoke with Dottie earlier this week, she mentioned they had conversations with Dr. Lavan Ansari, and that is something that came up. And so they took it to heart. And they've already made the change. Now it's time for everybody else to get in step and do the same as well. We know that empathy and sympathy is out there. Whenever you have a supermarket, right? No matter where you live, if you live in the suburbs, you have a supermarket. You live on that part of Buffalo, and there's one supermarket, and then people are gunned down. Forever etched in people's minds will be bodies there. And so there will be new life coming, as there's going to be a new supermarket, there's going to be another Tops from what we understand. But how do you turn that sympathy and empathy into action to make sure that, yes, there's going to be a supermarket, but should there just be one? Like, what is happening with people on the ground to deal with the private sector to say, come here, make a difference. Don't just say, I have sympathy, empathy, I want to help you. And we see the food stands there now, which are needed and helpful. What about another building? Is there not another supermarket that wants to come? Senator Gillibrand said that, she was going to make the calls. Are locals making the calls to say, you need to be here? There's money here. There is money on the in East Buffalo. I have to remember what I'm saying too, and not say East Side. There is money in East Buffalo. People are going to spend because people have to eat. What are you all doing to make sure that the private sector gets that message? And are you doing something now? And what do you want them to know? Because they're here now and they're listening.
I would like the private sector to know that there are huge opportunities on in East Buffalo with the Northland Workforce Training Center. This was a $102 million investment from the state to create a campus, not only to train workers for careers in advanced manufacturing and clean energy, but also to remediate industrial sites to get them ready to attract manufacturers from outside of the region into the region. Before we opened in 2017, East Buffalo had significant challenges, right? It was almost an everything desert. We only had the one grocery store, of course. There wasn't necessarily any sit down restaurants. The main restaurants were Kentucky Fried Chicken and McDonald's. There weren't any financial institutions. So that meant that East Side residents would have to cash their check or pay their bills at the local bodega. But since we've opened, we now have a sit-down restaurant, Manna at Northland. They're located within the campus. Bank One Buffalo, they just moved into the facility. Other banks, M&T Bank, Northwest Bank, they've moved on to Jefferson Avenue. So we were seeing growth. We had private sector companies, Garwood Medical Devices, move into the Northland campus, along with Retech Systems, as well as Spark Charge. Spark Charge, they make mobile charging stations for electric vehicles. So we have an emerging green economy that's bubbling up on East Buffalo. And then this tragedy happened and it seemed to set us back. So I would love for the private sector to strongly consider locating businesses on in East Buffalo, hiring residents from East Buffalo, and visiting and actually frequenting some of the restaurants and the businesses there so that we can start to impact that isolation index that I mentioned earlier. Because until we start to interact with each other and get to know one another, I believe some of the stereotypes and the biases are going to continue to fester and grow.
Pastor Blue?
I agree. Uh, Jefferson Avenue used to be a bustling place. I mean, we had everything on Jefferson, everything you needed. We had a couple of grocery stores on Jefferson, especially in William and Jefferson area as well. Barbershops, restaurants, uh, Henry's for those who are as old as I am used to be on the corner there as well. It used to be a lot of. It used to be the place to go to. The Apollo Theater used to be one of the places we would go to. Uh, Juneteenth would parade from Best and Jefferson down to Fillmore and Jefferson, Ferry and Jefferson, Ferry down to Fillmore, Fillmore down to Martin Luther King Park. It was Humboldt Park at that time. So it used to be a hustling and bustling place. And I agree that we need to be citizens, good community citizens of Buffalo. We shouldn't feel threatened to go in any area of Buffalo. We ought to be of one Buffalo. I hear this a lot, one Buffalo, but it seems that we're responding, we're reacting to tragedy. And since we're reacting, now it's time for us to respond. It's time for us to help in that development, bringing more businesses to the community, as it was spoken of before. It's time for people to come down and not just come down on the celebratory opportunity, but come down and just visit the areas that you maybe have never stepped foot in before if it wasn't for this particular tragedy. Uh, we need to look at how we can interact with one another. In social studies, we learned about the melting pot theory and the salad bowl theory, where we all come together from our cultures make us better. Everything that makes us different makes us better in bringing upon each other the areas of expertise that one may be lacking on. Uh, it's important that we become more centralized and more focused on building our community, and also legislating good laws that we can use to make sure that we don't fall back into the drama that we have here. And I'm using words like this because some people may have never heard those words talked or spoken of. So again, diversity, equity, inclusion. We need to learn the different languages of everyone. Bad, if one person says bad, doesn't mean that that's terrible. So we need to learn the different cultural differences that we have. We need to learn even the words that we're using. And I'm quite sure that there are parents online that don't understand their children right now because they're using different words and phrases. So as we continue to grow, as we continue to evolve, we need to continue to learn the diversity that each one brings to the table. And let me say this, diversity, equity, and inclusion does not mean you hire an African American or a woman to be in that role. Diversity, equity, and inclusion needs to be from the boardroom to the back room. So we need to make sure that we're looking at how we can diversify, how we can look at our communities that we are living in, that we're making money in, and see how we can be more proactive in attracting and also in being involved in the community. Those are very important things.
I think it's important that you bring that up. I'm going to go back now to our deputy mayor because, Crystal, when we look at your bio, it says you're not only just a lifelong resident of Buffalo, but you hold an advanced certification in diversity and inclusion from Cornell. With that being said, Pastor Blue talked about what once was in Buffalo. He talked about Henry's and all of the things that were on Jefferson Avenue. Many people in the private sector right now, and so for many of us, we probably were young. We don't remember when it was this booming area. Most people who are running companies now, if they're in their 40s or maybe if they're in their 50s, when they think of Jefferson Avenue, they don't think of something booming and bustling because they probably haven't seen it. You're starting to see a resurgence. So how does the city get in the heads of the private sector to help them to see we can bring back what once was and make it good again? What City
Sure.
Hall
So
did?
I'm not old enough to remember Henry's, but my grandfather owned a business on Jefferson Avenue, Jefferson Auto Parts, and down the street we had Figmo's grocery store. And I remember getting off the bus and even going down to Figmo's to get things to eat. It was bustling. And in addition to letting private sector know that there are opportunities in this and other areas, it's also important to build up the businesses and build up the Black businesses in the community. So I talked about my grandfather's business because it was Black owned. I talked about Mr. Figmos because I remember his, big personality that was Black owned. We can also, in addition to letting other private sector businesses know that they can come on to East Buffalo and they can be successful, I think it's important for us to also build up the Black businesses that we have that can be established in the area. Again, when you go back to the times that those were bustling businesses, they were Black owned. We had our own economy, and we can also build up the businesses again to that point where we can be on Jefferson, it can be bustling again, and not just for the Black community, but for all of the city of Buffalo to visit.
Absolutely, absolutely. And while we are focusing in on Jefferson Avenue, this is about Buffalo. We know that when this happened, even when the Buffalo Bills came down on Jefferson Avenue, and I remember my colleague Ashley Holder was asking the Pagulas and the players, and even the players acknowledge, yeah, these are the same people who are supporting us and coming to our games and probably using their last dollars to support us. And so the question was, are you going to continue to come back? So what can we do for the private sector? How do you get that message out there? Don't just come once, keep coming and do something and have a lasting impact. What can they do? Because I'm sure they want to do it. If they didn't want to, they wouldn't be part of this program now. So the intention is great. The motivation is there. Maybe it's just helping them to see how. And so, how can they do that? Mr. Tucker, do you want to weigh in on that? Is he muted on your end too?
I'm sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
That should be a phrase, right? Can you hear me now? But one of the things that we did early on in Northland, because with the training center, we have several partners. Our partners include SUNY Erie College, Alfred State College, Northland Workforce Training Center. And one of the things that I noticed was that even though we were partners, everybody was operating in silos. So we decided to have every semester a lunch together. And at this lunch together, um, we required the attendees to sit with someone who did not look like them, as well as who did not work within the same organization, so that they can get to know one another. Even though we were all working in the same facility, we didn't know each other. We didn't have relationships with each other, which allowed those stereotypes to continue. So one of the things that I think we can do is to be more intentional in interacting and inviting the private sector companies into the East, into East Buffalo. I'm trying not to say East Side, into East Buffalo to have those interactions, to have those meaningful conversations. And I believe once we start to develop relationships with one another, um, it will create a better atmosphere and a better environment for everyone in Western New York.
And I think what you said is great. And I can't imagine anybody sitting, listening to this forum this morning, this symposium, would not see the benefit in doing that, because when it has been done, it has been effective. Thomas, from the point of the Urban League, is that something that you all would push? And have you done it already?
Certainly, we would push that, but we're looking again for bold action. We're looking for some of the causation. Right, we're talking about this East Buffalo, or an area that had a concentration of black businesses, had a concentration of um, black residents, um, because of redlining, right? Policies and practices that um, force this community there. We're talking about this rich black thriving business community that they just didn't disappear. There was no investment. There was no one who gave them loans to continue their business. They also disappeared because their children, who could carry the business forward, didn't find opportunities in Buffalo. And they, while they might have had a chance to be educated here or elsewhere, they had to leave to get those opportunities. So those communities were corralled and starved out. All of that thriving stuff, that was not, that was not by default. you know in some cases that was by design and policies. And so we have to address those things, and it's just not like how they're going to get back from where they were. They have to talk about all those things that caused it. And if you're really business partners who are looking at things like risk aversion, who are looking at things like the economics of are if we build another store, are people going to come? Well, in other neighborhoods, there's the assumption that you build it there, that store will not only be supported by the residents, but other individuals who choose to come there. And I don't know that that's the same position people take. It's like if I build something on the west, on the, I'm sorry, on in East Buffalo, on the east side of Buffalo, or then it'll only be supported by those individuals in that community. And so the economics don't work out well because they don't expect that there's going to be a lot of other traffic that comes through there. But that is all symptomatic of all these conditions that were created. Like, you made this place so segregated. So now we need to, rise above that and say we got to, it's a little painful, but it may not look the same. And then, lastly, this starvation, or this scarcity, um, where a zero sum game. When we talk about a supermarket that took years to be in Buffalo, and then there was only that one for over 20 years. When we talk about this zero sum game that says if we have, that we could only have one, or if there's an opportunity, we have to choose between this or that. Where in other communities they have this and that, right? It's not, they're not talking about, can we, should cops come back? They're talking about how many, right? And then in some cases, they're talking about variety and competition and all these other things that exist in other communities, and they don't. We're going with this or that. Other communities have this and that, and some of them have these and those, right? They have multiples of these things. So we have to address all those things. And from a business perspective, I've been at the Urban League for a year and a half, but I've been over 30 years in the private sector, right? So I recognize that business decisions are being made about this, and they consider the current market conditions and factors, but they also many of them have to take some accountability for how we got here, and then we have to adjust policies, practices, and even our investment. We have to look at those and make some bold and courageous and uncomfortable decisions to move this forward.
And Crystal, so just to be clear, and we do know the narrative is out there, one supermarket in East Buffalo. East Buffalo is large. In that particular area right there, that was the main supermarket for most people. It was the Tops on Jefferson. There are other supermarkets on the east part of Buffalo, East Buffalo. You want to talk about that? And also just helping people to understand why that one was really still so significant. But there are other supermarkets.
So yes, so we do have Price Right. We have Save a Lot on Genesee, Save a Lot at the Broadway Market, Price Choppers, which is actually community owned, on Genesee as well. So there are other supermarkets. We know that the narrative is that was the only supermarket on East Buffalo, and there are they're not larger supermarkets. You'd have to talk to those companies to ask what their criteria is before they build a supermarket. But I know firsthand from the stories. I wasn't involved in it, but a lot of our leaders, including the mayor, including Crystal Peoples-Stokes, were very involved with locating the land for Tops to come, engaging the corporate board to come on the east side, making sure that they came over there. So they did, and we still want to support the Price Right, the Save-A-Lots, two Save-A-Lots on the east side of Buffalo, Price Choppers, and the other locally. But what we also want to make sure is that they have made available for the community fresh foods, that they've made available healthy foods options, and affordable, because then we go into the difference of having, I know people have called it a food desert, but there are supermarkets. But let's talk about food insecurity, and let's talk about access to healthy food and how we can better support, and how we can get private sector to better support and come over with these options for us, because we, as much as anybody else, deserves access to this.
Pastor Blue, you want to weigh in on that? We have been
Yes.
talking about one supermarket, but I think it's also true for the people in the neighborhood who are saying this is our main supermarket, right? When you talk about a Tops or a Wegmans, they're looking at the big name because that's where they're going to get their fresh fruits, their fresh vegetables. So is the NAACP doing anything?
Well, let me first talk about, let's look at the comparison. If you go on Walden in Harlem, you find that there's a Tops right on the corner where there used to be a Walmart. Walmart moved out, and now you go a little further down. There's a Price Right, there's an Aldi's, there's a Target, which does groceries. Go a little further down on Union, there's another Tops. That's less than a mile and a half away. But go a little further down Walden, you will find a Super Walmart. Go a little further down, you'll find a Wegmans. Now, comparison to geographical area, you have about 5 to 6 grocery stores, chains that you can go to, and they're all within roughly a mile and a half radius. On Jefferson, Tops was the only one within roughly a 2-mile radius. You have all those stores. We look at not a food desert. A desert is a man-made thing. Food apartheid. It deals with socio-economical conditions. And that's what we had on Jefferson. That's why Jefferson was an easy target for this white supremacist to come in and cause disruption. So when we look at geographical areas, how come that area has roughly 5 to 6 grocery store chains, small and large, in that particular area? Two tops, by the way. How come the Jefferson community, the East Side, we have to be as distant in that type? We have the same people, the same economics there, because as you stated before, people will buy food. We need food. We got to live together. We need food. We have to eat. But we look at the disparities in that particular location and the one in Jefferson. I don't see a comparison. I don't see a disparity in the amount of people. You have the same amount of people in both those geographical areas. But let's look at it. You have a lot more of the suburban. Let me be clear. You have a lot more white people out there than you do black people out there. So when we look at the dollars, and I'm not trying to make it black and white, but let's look at it. Look at the dollars, look at the individuals that they represent that live out there. I'm not making it about race. The store owners made it about race because they look at who's there. So I'm anyway. You mentioned the Bills, and I'll go back to what the NAACP is doing. The Bills Stadium was on Jefferson and Best. Jefferson and Best before it moved out to Orchard Park. If the stadium was built back in Buffalo, there'll be a lot more, I believe, economic advantages to the community, to the city. Instead of paying for 8 games out there, if the stadium was built in Buffalo, there'll be a lot more individuals that are able not only to come to the games, but work during those times. So it would be a great economic upturn for the city. Crystal mentioned FIGMOs. FIGMOs, the acronym is, finally, I got my own supermarket. That, when you
Do we
spell it
need
out,
another FIGMOs? Do we need another FIGMOs?
but let's look at what the NAACP is doing. One of the things that we want to continue to do is to help our people become more activists and agitators. And the only way in which we can do it, in voting and getting them more astute to the issues, to the individuals who want to represent us. We have a lot that we are doing right now. Also, we want to engage our young people to make sure that they have the finances, that they have the astuteness to make sure they can go to school. And that's one of the biggest things that we can do. Education is key. Knowledge is power. And we want all of our individuals, all of our children to have that power, and even our millennials to have that power so they can be better informed and so they can take over where we left off and do better than what we can do right now. So we need them to be employed and employable. We need them to have that opportunity. North Forest Work Center, before it was there, I used to clean that building. And I'm so glad that economic development has now reused that particular building. So we need to make sure that we're working toward educating our young folk, getting them actively involved in the political process, getting them actively involved in starting their own business, because they are some of the most astute and smart individuals. They just need opportunities. And that's one of the things that we want to do, is provide them opportunities to excel in the areas of life that they can be brilliant at. And they are brilliant. It's just that they didn't have the opportunity.
So we have about 15 minutes, a little bit less than that in this segment. And so let's talk directly to our private sector. They're here. And as I mentioned before, they're here because they want to be here and they want to help and they want to do something. And everybody can benefit, right? Nobody wants to lose money. Everybody wants to make money. They want to do better for themselves. And the private sector has every right to do that. That's why they're here. So let's go around and talk about this. Who are the voices? What voices should they listen to that are going to help them to make a difference and to make things better? And what can they effectively do now to make a difference to help the East Buffalo and Buffalo as a whole? let's talk directly to them. What can they do? We'll start with you, Stephen.
I think one of the first things they can do is to create organizational cultures within their businesses that support hiring and advancing diverse candidates. And probably everyone on this call has a DEI initiative or a goal to diversify their workforce. But what I see is oftentimes um, those agendas, those priorities are not trickled down throughout the organization and are communicated to those frontline supervisors, because most of the individuals who are hired, they're going to report to someone else within those organizations. And if that frontline supervisor is not culturally competent enough or understands the priorities of the business, it's going to impact that candidate's ability to be retained and advance in that company. And we're seeing that firsthand as we're placing individuals in jobs. And I think not an easy thing to do, but something that's not a heavy lift, something that businesses should be doing, because whenever you have high turnover, it affects productivity and production and earnings. So something that is pretty that we're prepared to help with, and I know the partnership is prepared to help with, is educating those frontline supervisors on the importance of being a good supervisor, as well as ensuring that they're culturally competent so that when diverse candidates are hired, they can be retained and advanced in those private sector companies.
And Thomas, from your perspective with the Urban League, talk directly to our private sector who are listening on this symposium right now. What can they do and what voices do they need to listen to? Because there's always a lot of noise out there. There are a lot of people always chatting about we can do this and we can do that. We all know not everybody is credible. We have to just call it as we see it. Not everybody is credible. So, therefore, who should they listen to? And what do you tell them that they can do now to make an impact?
Right. So I want to lift up also what Stephen was saying about the corporate culture. So it's not the them versus the east side or diversity. Many of these organizations already have people within their organization that are from these communities. So I would say a few things. One is that with that same corporate culture and bringing it down from the top management has a vision and top management has that culture in mind. But when you get down to middle level management or those who are directly supervising, even if you give them that corporate message, but you have a mix, but you also have some other corporate goals that supersede that. Like, yeah, we want you to be this, and we want you to have this kind of corporate cultural competency, but that's number 5 on your list, and it's worth 5 points towards what the company prioritizes, and the profitability and the number of customers you bring in, and if those things have more prominence, then you know even with the best intentions, those people are going to go after those goals. So some of those goals have to be reprioritized. Also, I would say, when they have programs that look to help people succeed, and they're trying to bring forth equity, not equality, but equity, um, you can't use a quality lens, an equality lens, because people of color who don't have the network of nepotism, cronyism, all the other advantages that they have by possibly being just born on second base. When they don't have that, then it's not only important to try to make sure that you put safeguards in place to help them succeed, but so you want to give them not only the equal opportunity to succeed, but you want to give them the equal opportunity to fail. Because for other cultures, if they don't get it right and they're learning you're trying to nurture them and get them to success, if they make a mistake, it's part of the learning process. For Black and brown cultures, if they make a mistake, it could be career ending, right? So they need that right to fail like everyone else too, and it's not be the end of something, especially noting that they don't have all the support resources that exist, and trying to build those things. So one, understand what already exists, understand how this permeates down to the culture, but it has to have this has to rise to a level of importance with all the other corporate objectives, so that it becomes really embedded in the culture.
Thank you for that. Pastor Blue?
I want to say, first of all, thank you to Dottie and the Niagara Partnership for this opportunity, and to my esteemed friends and panelists. One of the things that we have to do is have trainings, implicit bias trainings, what it means, cultural diversity trainings, because as it was said, the mid-level managers may not get the main message that the presidents and CEOs get, and it has to be disseminated on an annual basis. We have to learn how to live with one another, and just because you have a position doesn't mean that you have authority to rule over someone like a slave master. And it's very important that we open the eyes of everyone from top to bottom, from bottom to top, on the practices that are still there. There are still some biases that have not been addressed, and they have to be addressed. We have to really be open and honest about what's going on in America today. There's been a lot of struggles that we have to battle. I've been in the military, served in the reserves for 20 years, and there's still some biases. I was in my office one day, and a guy walked right past me and asked to see who was in charge. I intentionally walked away, and he had to come and find me in order to get what he wanted. After he walked past me, I was a little ticked off, but he had to come back to me anyway because he thought since I was Black that I didn't have any authority. And that's what's happening today. People are walking by people who are in authority just because of their color of their skin. They're ignoring them. And that's wrong. So we need to have implicit bias training. We need to have diversity training that sticks to the individual, not just to fill a square. And also that needs to be based on the employee workforce that we have. How many people are in management? How many people are helping to make decisions? And that's important. You want diversity and inclusion, true diversity and inclusion, diversity, equity, and inclusion. How many individuals are in decision-making seats to help make decisions on the entire organization? Be it family-owned or startup, it's very important that your board picture looks like the community. In the hospital,
Yes.
they have all these white doctors, but you don't have any minority doctors. I'm sorry, I'm on the tangent, but I'm not a militant individual. I'm just passionate about what I'm talking about. Thank you.
And thank you. Thank you. And the passion is good. And I think for anyone listening, they're hearing what you're saying, and all we can do is listen. And if you're going to be really about it and want to do something, then you'll act, right? This is about turning the talk into action if you want to be a part of it. And if you don't, I think we have to acknowledge, then you don't. But be about it if you say you're going to be. Crystal, we'll wrap it up with you. Your thoughts on the voices that need to be heard. I know you're speaking from City Hall, but as you know, from being at Buffalo State and some of the other things that you've done, there are certain voices that we have to listen to. How does the private sector discern what's right for their particular business, who they should listen to?
I think it's important to listen to a wide variety of perspectives. And Thomas, Stephen, Pastor Blue have all said wonderful things. And I'm just going to put on my D&I hat here and give just a couple of extra things. You know, oftentimes, especially in light of the past couple of years, private sector companies tend to look at this as a checklist, and it cannot be a checklist. It has to be a concerted commitment, right? And that starts from the top. So be brave, right? Look at your mission statement, look at your value statement, look at how, not just the culture, but look at what is out there publicly in terms of your company's goals. Be brave and change it. Add in a commitment to inclusion and a commitment to serving the community. Another thing is a lot of people look at the adding a professional and they check the box, they put them in a lower level diversity professional. That's not going to make it. This person needs to be at the top in every meeting as you make decisions relative to your company, giving you a perspective that says, this might not be taken so well by this community, or you may come off this way to this community. They have to be at the top. It can't be a checkbox that you put them on the bottom level. And it needs to come from the top down in terms of management. Get an array of different perspectives. I think it's important to have all different perspectives. And there might not be agreeing perspectives. On East Buffalo, we don't all agree with what solutions are, but you should listen to what everyone's perspective is. And then see who's had the most success, see who's had longevity, see who is doing something and who is accomplishing, and who's about action more than about talking.
Crystal, thank you so much. This has been a great panel. And I hope that members of our private sector who are listening, I hope that you gained something from it, from hearing from the voices of the NAACP with Pastor Mark Blue, the Urban League with Thomas Beauford, Northland Training Workforce, what they're doing, what they're experiencing, what they're seeing, and what they're putting out, and what those individuals are seeing. And to hear from our Deputy Mayor, Crystal Rodriguez Dabney, your perspective is really great, especially with the diversity that you've been doing before you even came back to City Hall, right? We know you were there and then you came back. So thank you everyone for joining us this morning. It's been a pleasure. I think I learned something too. And when we talk about diversity and inclusion, this is something that I'll even take back to my employer, because it's important that those voices are also heard when we talk about the boardroom, but in management and news as well. We are all here. We're all Buffalo, and we're here to make it better. And it can only be stronger if all voices are heard at the table, but also knowing what voices we need to listen to. So Dottie, thank you again. We're going to wrap this up and turn it back over to you. And I know that everybody's going to have a break a little bit later, or probably now, to go into those smaller sessions. But thank you for having me this morning.
Claudine, thank you for your really wonderful moderation of this panel, and your voice is one of the voices we should listen to, as well as the people who were on the panel. I feel so blessed that we live in a community that has such incredible leadership in those really important anchor institutions to help us navigate where we're going. I would just say in closing, all of the work that the partnership is doing in DEI is really around the issue that Reverend Blue and others brought up, which is helping employers build inclusive workplace cultures. And I will tell you when you talk about a checklist, and Crystal did, employers really want to know, how do I do it? Just tell me what to do. And the answer is, of course, it's different. It's different what your company's circumstances and also where you are on your journey. So thank you, Claudine, for being here on your precious time off. We know how hard you work, and look forward to seeing you in person sometime very soon.
Thank you.
So let's do just a couple of housekeeping things just before we go to break, and I'll be very quick. We're currently at the main stage. The right-hand top corner of your screen indicates agenda, help, and lobby. The lobby is the best place to determine the locations of where to go. Today's events are being captioned for accessibility and inclusivity. To turn on those captions, please click on CC beneath the video player window. And I will just, a little editorial comment. We got a suggestion last year as part of the survey to make this closed caption, and we did take that and put that into place. So thank you for whoever suggested that to us last year. We should have thought of it ourselves. The agenda lays out our day, making it easy for you to access the schedule, and you have 3 choices to get help if you need it. One, you can click on help, that's located in the top right-hand corner of the screen, or concierge, which is located in the lobby, and you can also email support@kingevents.ca for assistance. So if you need help, we certainly can provide it. As I mentioned earlier, the Meet Our Speakers section has all the bios for all of today's presenters, and they're a very impressive group of people. So if you've got some time to poke through that would be really, really great. Your input and feedback regarding the symposium is critical to our success and to next year's event. The survey link is located in the chat. We really would appreciate it if you would fill it out, and if you do, you will automatically be registered to win some best-selling D&I books that were selected by some of our presenters. So right now we're going to take a break until 10:45 and meet on the main stage to welcome our keynote speaker, Melissa Donaldson, who will speak on Let Inclusion Be Your Guide. And if you didn't hear Melissa last year, you're going to be in for a great treat. She is just amazing and terrific. So look forward to seeing you all back at 10:45. Enjoy your break.